All right, ladies and gentlemen, it does appear that there is another Wuthering Waves 2.0 review coming out, and this one is about 16 days after the patch. There's been a lot of time for the dust to settle, a lot of time for those thoughts to be fully hashed out, and it's by none other than Marco Meatball himself, a former opera singer who's gone over and started really taking a deep dive into video game music and honestly just video games themselves. And he's been a really big supporter of Wuthering Waves 2.0. I don't know if you've seen a lot of reacts that he's done to a lot of the OSTs, a lot of the things that have been going on when it comes to this game, and it's safe to say that he is an absolute fan. The one thing that I am a fan of is also the fact that his facial hair is starting to grow out again. That clean shaven look was definitely something that I was like, I don't know about that one, boss. So I'm glad to hear that he's slowly cultivating that big bushy beard that was, in my opinion, a part of his brand in the first place. So let's go ahead, let's stop focusing on that in particular, and let's go ahead and get on into the review.
Gacha games are seemingly a dime a dozen these days, with every iteration of the open world formula being peddled around by content creators and gamers alike as the next Genshin killer. This certainly does a few things to harm the incoming games. One, being compared to one of the most monumentally successful games of its type in the West, an impossible and basically worthless comparison in most cases. And two, this continues to fuel the flame of tribalism and the idea that if you play one game, you cannot be curious or interested in another of its kind, or so the internet would have you think is the case. Kuro Games launched 1.0 in the middle.
He's true about all of that. There are so many individuals who refuse to touch Wuthering Waves or recognize anything that Wuthering Waves does simply due to the fact that it competes against Genshin. Same with other gacha games, right? Like Honkai Star Rail and ZZZ. There are a lot of people who will simply hate it, and if they know that you played or like it, they will hate you. And, you know, it's a little bit like sports teams, but probably worse.
Of 2024, closely on the heels of its CBT2 beta test, which ultimately fell pretty flat. A launch of any new game is an incredibly delicate process, but the launch of a gacha game where audiences tend to be extremely harsh and deeply entrenched in preconceived notions and opinions is a near deadly one. Plenty of games have come out since Genshin's rise to fame that have been quickly snuffed out and altogether forgotten. That the risk involved on having a bad launch can be nearly catastrophic for a company if it's too similar to the king of the anime gacha space. While I played the personally highly anticipated launch of Wuthering Waves for myself, and ultimately landed on the idea that it was a good game that had enormous potential, but felt disappointing in its offerings. When it came to story,
that's a fair take to have. That's a fair take to have, especially when it came to the different like character interactions, the overall atmosphere. You know, it was a little dark, it was a little gray, it was a little bit gloomy, and didn't have that much differentiation and liveliness in the world. And it's a very common critique, right, that I've even made myself, despite being the #1 Kuro butt. And it's an honest one too. There were so many great things about its systems, its combat, its overall design when it came to like its characters that kept a lot of people coming back. And now with 2.0, you know, I think it's kind of completed the circle and it's now everything good. Like everything about it is good, and hopefully he'll dive a little bit into that himself.
And music especially. Exploration, its ecosystem, and especially the combat has never left me with a sour feeling. And in fact, I have quite enjoyed all of these features quite a bit ever since the original 1.0 release, and have played it consistently over the last 7 months. The music overall felt all over the place and with no particular...
You know the Desert Rock Highlands, or Norfall Barrens? The music there is so fucking bad. The music in Norfall Barrens has to be like some of the worst I've ever heard in gacha gaming. There's a reason why I like 100% of the region and then never went back, because it literally just sounds like somebody is like farting the entire time. That's what the soundtrack sounds like. Somebody had like way too much fucking gas, ate like a pound of beans, and it's just like getting their rear end right next to the mic and just popping off. That's all it sounds like there.
Sense of direction, and was a far cry from the melodically driven and powerful pieces of Kuro Games' first offering, Punishing Grey Raven, a game with music I enjoyed so much that I actually discovered a love for EDM that I didn't even know I had.
I think that was one of the biggest turnoffs for a lot of people coming from PGR, even with knowledge about Wuthering Waves. PGR soundtracks were so good. I'm seeing like Narwhal in the chat. That's a great one. PGR's tracks were so good that it almost set the expectation moving forward that Wuthering Waves' music was going to be of similar quality. And when it wasn't, you know, obviously music's only one part of the game, but it was like another potential turnoff for people.
1.0 felt unfinished, rushed, and generic, with its somewhat muted colors, vast open spaces with not much to actually see.
Look how good he looks with the beard. Not gay, but like he looks better with the beard, let's be honest, guys.
That didn't feel kind of bland and samey, and music that ultimately wasn't bad, was just incredibly forgettable. Beyond these complaints, the gacha system, always a sticking point in these types of games, followed the tried and true formula of its rival in the space, offering up the 50-50 for characters instead of its previous PGR system of just needing to reach the hard cap of however many pulls it is, which felt more player-friendly and altogether more generous. That said, the weapon banner was guaranteed at 80
I hope he mentions the sequence nodes in the shop.
pulls max, and Kuro has continued its player-forward model of making it fairly easy to accrue the necessary in-game currency in order to properly pull for characters as a free-to-play player. One I am not, but based on my conversations with free-to-play players,
Look at this big whale. He's a big whaler, admitted to his whaling. Maybe that's why he likes the game so much, because he spends so much money on it. It's just a sunk cost fallacy of no return, guys.
most have been pleased with their ability to play the game and receive characters they want even when losing the 50-50. I know it's unrealistic and not financially lucrative for these types of games, but having the 50-50 player-unfriendly system go away while retaining the gacha component is something I hope to see as these games continue to dominate the market with their popularity. It's unlikely, but a man can dream. What was really surprising, though, came in subsequent patches that
One thing he didn't mention in the shop when it comes to the characters is the fact that when it comes to like dupes, big whaling, getting a character to HES 6, you can buy 2 out of the 4 required additional copies in the store for the pull currency. And it's still a system that they have to this day. And when you think about it as a whole, it's kind of one of the dumber things that they could do monetarily by Kuro games, because that is potentially 320 pulls that a person doesn't have to spend. Because to guarantee a character at the maximum pity with the worst possible luck, it takes 160. And so that's 320 pulls, or like literally if you were to just buy them for the Lunite, the premium currency that you can buy, that's like literally hundreds of dollars to get 320 pulls. So, you know, in the worst case scenario, they're literally missing out on like almost $1,000 from each whale. Who knows how many whales there are as 16 characters, but I imagine that adds up. And obviously on the flip hand, right, you have the opportunity for free-to-play players or even low spenders to acquire dupes for characters that they've pulled, and maybe want to get like, you know, some extra power or like show more devotion towards, and they can do it at a relatively low expense and with low effort. And it makes like those S1s, those S2s, you know, Shorekeeper and Camellia, a lot more accessible for people that want it. And, you know, it's kind of like that extra, you know, just that like that gimme that like the free-to-plays and the low spenders can have, that is just not accessible in any other game.
Sure, yes, there was some filler in the 1.0 patches, but 1.1 brought with it Mount Firmament, new characters with Jinshi and Changli, and a whole new area with its own system and mechanics to unravel and discover. This was a welcome surprise for many of us who were committed to supporting and playing Wuthering Waves. The music improved and had a really lovely overarching melody that was memorable, if not a bit too simple, with just the melody as the dominant aspect of the music, but it also brought real highs and lows for what quickly became a fan favorite character with Jinshi and the challenges of being a Sentinel's Resonator. And then
There's a reason why she's the first premium skin in the game. They actually did an amazing job with 1.1, and she is, for a lot of people, one of the most popular characters in the game. Otherwise, the first limited skin in the game, Peach Blossom, wouldn't be her. It would be somebody else. 1000%, she's one of the most popular characters in the game. They did a great job with her.
finally, later on in the 1.0 patches, we went to the Black Shores. Another, in my opinion, colossal victory for the continued vision of what Wuthering Waves was wanting to become. New, terrific, compelling characters, improvements to dialogue, character interaction, and the general quality of life became very high. It felt that Kuro Games was actively listening to player feedback and taking it seriously,
Talk about the quality of life now!
rather than just trying to make as much money as possible. Admittedly, there was still, a bit of a wow factor that was missing. Sure, the worlds were visually stunning, and there were some incredible set pieces, but it still didn't have the thing that makes you want to come back day after day to live in and experience the world, at least generally speaking, and certainly for myself. Music as well was really starting to turn a corner and becoming less and less meandering, without any specific intention. This patch also focused a lot on sound quality that was reminiscent of Nier, which if you played those games, you can understand why that is a compliment of very high praise. These patches also felt to me like the beginning of a time period where it really felt like the game was trying to deviate from the many parallels to the big bad Genshin Impact, And it felt like while it may have taken some inspiration or direct inspiration from it, directly or indirectly, there was a vision and a desire to tell its own story. Sure, yes, that tribalism I mentioned earlier will probably never go away and is incredibly annoying and stupid and redundant, and the infighting will continue for the foreseeable future, especially with an at times disgruntled fan base who feels like they're not being heard, but at least
I love how he's not specific, but we really know exactly what he's talking about. Hoyoverse fans, except those that are playing ZZZ, have to be so pissed right now. They have to be so angry that the games are just progressively, literally getting worse every single patch. Their games, Honkai Star Rail and Genshin Impact, are literally just getting worse every single patch. To see a game where the devs are actually making it better, where every feature that they're adding is just actually good and doesn't feel predatory, has to be frustrating, to be honest. It has to be extremely frustrating.
at least Wuthering Waves was starting to feel like a structured game with an idea of what it wanted to be. That takes us to today, and I have to say, the ridiculously successful Wuthering Waves 2.0 update, and ultimately the point of this video. So has Wuthering Waves managed to actually make waves? Yes, astonishingly. For the first time, the game truly feels like it has its own identity, free of the confines of previous comparisons to the other game in the market of this level. Has Wuthering Waves music improved its music? When I tell you it's basically a miracle, I cannot understate enough how good the music in this update actually is. Everywhere you turn, there is a new surprise to witness and hear. Whether it's a side quest you could accidentally miss by not veering off the road most traveled, or stumbling on ancient ruins. The game has music in spades, not only that fits the narrative, but also elevates the narrative to the point that repeat listening in your car would also be delightful.
Bro, the song is a banger. The one that he's playing in the background, they released it, I think, with the live stream for the game. That was about like a week before. I just play this one for fun because it's that fucking good. And we haven't even dove into all the different OSTs, all of the different like actual, like I think they use like a 12-year-old song that they bought the rights for. And like the song is just good. And they were like, damn, let's just put this in our game. They sourced, they outsourced, they found the quality, they developed stuff in-house, and it's solid. It's great. And obviously, like, you know, this guy has like a music fetish, right? So this is going to be one of the big areas that he focuses on a lot. And if the guy with the music fetish, right, is telling you that it's great, that it's awesome, we're probably going to like it too.
It moves beyond the game. When we take a soundtrack and move away from the game with it, that's when a soundtrack is truly victorious, and that would ultimately be the best way for me to describe the soundtrack. Victorious. A victory. 4 tracks in particular really stand out to me. The track Within the Church of the Order of the Deep,
Yes, that one is amazing. I'm glad he's playing it.
Us with this sound of hallowed ground where every step you take is sacred, where we're led to believe that the majesty of the Sentinel is with us at every corner. Sharp, incredible horns announcing our arrival with stunning 4-part harmonies in the voices that is reminiscent of the Gregorian chant or a song you might literally hear in a Catholic church today, the Century Construct, the closest track I've heard to Kuro's sister game, Punishing Grey Raven, with frenetic rhythms, terrific womp-womps, and a fusion of classical and baroque that is a rare delight to hear mixed in with electronic music while also featuring string quartet and harpsichord. The opening to the vast openness of the Raguna countryside, a track with rights bought by Kuro Games called A Fairy Tale that sounds more befitting of a Witcher 3 intro or Freerun than any other game I've played within the gacha space, that invites us into exploration and wonder with gentle vocals that provide us with curiosity and even warm our hearts to the warm hues of green and brown we experience in the countryside. The Lorelei boss fight, with echoes and references to Mozart's The Magic Flute, a reimagining of a timeless song that will have cultural implications far deeper than one can even begin to consider.
Remember what I said about music fetish? Y'all thought I was lying. It's true.
Exposing millions of people to the power of opera as a musical medium, and that elicited this outrageous reaction out of me, a former professional opera singer. Wow, that's cool. Oh! Oh! Oh my god! Oh my god! No fucking way! Holy shit! Oh my god! They referenced Queen of the Night! Lastly, the menacing Elden Ring style FromSoft approach to the Dirge Dragon, whose size alone makes it a terrifying foe, story reasons not mentioned for the spoilers. Harpsichord and strong male choir dominate this track as we step into a dark baroque horrorscape of terror and destruction. These tracks,
the one thing to kind of like take away from that on my end is simply the level of variety that you had and the clear references to so many other genres and so many different types of games. Like that Sentry Gargoyle fight, right? The one that he just went through with like the whole like that one reminds me of fucking like Metal Gear Solid, right? Metal Gear Rising, Revengeance. It reminds me of that one with like the crazy beats. You've obviously got like the whatever the Baroque stuff that he was talking about, the classical music with the Lorelei fight. And then this one is just like, okay, like you're in a literal boss battle over here against the Dragon of Dirge. There was so much different variety, and you can revisit these fights and have the same exact music play over and over again. This is one thing in particular that we haven't recognized yet that is going to be apparent really soon once these bosses start rotating into the end game Tower of Adversity. The boss's music plays in the tower. And so if any of these bosses do show up in the rotation, that's the music that's going to be playing in the tower. Okay, obviously not the church one because there's no boss here yet. That's what's going to be playing in the tower, and that's going to be pretty fucking badass.
Are only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the variety on display here. Day and night tracks, a world quest with dynamic music featuring a truly modern twist on Baroque music. It shifts into a combat version incredibly smoothly and then resets back. Dynamic music. The music on display is a masterclass in guiding players emotionally in a direction and letting them feel whatever the intended purpose or setting of an area may have been during the game design creation process. It's a huge win. If 1.0 was disappointing, then 2.0 is a complete reversal and a total triumph musically. And I cannot help but recommend it to you for the music alone.
I mean, this is the thing, ladies and gentlemen. This guy is probably the biggest expert when it comes to music in the space. And so hearing this from him has to be some of the highest praise possible for the game overall. Let's be honest here. This is like Gordon Ramsay telling you that your food doesn't taste like shit, that it's actually pretty good. And a lot of people are going to take the word of a Ramsay when it comes to food, like the way that, you know, Marco Meatball is talking about game music. He knows what he's actually talking about, and he knows it, quite frankly, better than any of us here or anybody watching. There might be somebody out there who knows better, but, you know, make your own channel then, buddy. Make your own video.
More than anything, this game feels like a game first and a gacha game second. Oftentimes in this style of game, there can be a sense that the purpose of doing things around the world is ultimately to get you to keep going, to keep opening those gacha tabs, and spend those in-game currencies, or better yet, swipe your credit card. But in the case of WUWA 2.0, it doesn't feel this way in the slightest. Sure, it's there, but it feels like this game wants to be a Witcher, or a Red Dead, but in anime format. It wants you to explore its world, see what it has to discover, and in a way, it lends itself to an MMORPG experience, kind of. Not dissimilar to the wonderment and curiosity that a game like Guild Wars 2 can provide, where the world is yours to find and uncover, and who knows what you might see. In fighting between enemy factions? Sure. Old ruins that harbor a dark secret? You got that. A flying minigame where you're actually high as a kite and suddenly you're flying with a boss from earlier in the game? Why not? There's spectacle everywhere throughout the landscape, and the landscape is aching to be discovered.
I got some flowery ass words, some crazy phrasing. High as a kite, aching to be discovered. Oh my goodness.
Flight was also something that was recently introduced as sort of gliding mechanic, and it is an incredible showcase of Kuro Games wanting to make something unique. And
Blood is a poet.
Traversal has always been something really important to these devs, and clearly this is the ultimate form of that, though I wonder what else they have in store for us for future expansions.
I've said it once and I'll say it again. If the flight is this good, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to do some digging. We're about to go underground. We're about to have some subterranean navigation. And if there's one company that I have confidence in digging underground, shit, it might be Kuro Games. We might have the next region. It's all about fucking an underground civilization. We're gonna find some goddamn dwarves.
Flying is the pinnacle way to get from point A to point B, and the more you explore the regions, the more you're rewarded with stamina that allows you to fly further and longer, allowing you even more time to bask in the majesty of this incredibly inviting and well-designed world.
What if they had spaceships? That'd be kind of sick.
As I mentioned, the world is layered in such a way that the mind can't help but want to see what's under the clouds or over the horizon. There is so much to see and explore and come across naturally, but if you want, Kuro Games has also made the process easier by giving you easy ways to proceed right to where you want to go, saving you time and allowing you to get what you want to get done quickly and efficiently if you don't have a lot of time on your hands. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this story, but it's also really good. I gotta say, I am so tired of every gacha game having these convoluted phrases or terms that I have to remember, and then having a character repeat themselves 30 times or rehash what we just experienced, or
Amphorious!
go on a 40-minute long monologue about stuff that is so in the weeds that you'd need a
Amphorious!
PhD just to understand it. In the case of 2.0 story, is pretty on the nose.
Yep.
There are some pacing issues, mostly in some NPC interactions at the beginning as the world building starts, and especially in some exchanges with adjacent characters that could be shorter in the back half of Act 2. But overall, I was locked in for the full 10 hours.
He's probably talking about the old man, I don't know, like Benito Mussolini or something, like the guy that like fucking went up on the balloons. He's probably talking about that one. And yeah, a lot of the stuff at the start.
I spent with the 2.0 story. I found it intriguing, maybe a bit predictable, but overall, when it ended for this update, I didn't want it to end. That's personally how I know it's good, per my standards. The companion quest with Carlotta, on the other hand, was by far the longest of the companion story quests we've had, and while I felt the beginning 30 minutes were way too much back and forth to...
Kind of based. The Carlotta quest was good, but it did start off a little bit slowly. Gonna be honest, but some could say it was a nice change of pace and like relaxed after all of the crazy shit that was going on towards the latter end of Act 3.
Areas and conversations with people that you kind of don't really know or care about. It was actually a really satisfying conclusion that felt we really had arrived and learned more about her. With some ever so slightly tighter scenes, I think we would have had ourselves a near perfect story experience. In total, I would say the story experience landed around an 8.5 out of 10 if we combine the main story, Carlotta's story, and some of the world quests. This is another point I should make, is that everything that happens after the main story in the world and Carlotta quest just feel naturally good because they feel like a continuation of the 2.0 story. So these world quests or companion quests, which oftentimes could feel like filler a lot of the time, actually fill some really nice gaps for characters' motivations. And they drip feed just a bit more about the world to satiate while we wait for the continuation of story events, which I expect to be highly compelling.
I'm glad that he didn't spoil too much about them and kind of gave the general gist because, well, I haven't done any of the world quests for 2.0 yet. I'm saving them a little bit for later.
Wuthering Waves is in a phenomenal spot right now, deriving quality game-first content and providing challenge in combat, though it would be nice to have a difficulty slider or up the difficulty a bit for story bosses as they are entirely too easy. I think this is a
Just unbuild your characters, bro. Just unequip all your echoes, bro. Come on, man. Make your own difficulty, just like Elden Ring.
A solid game and a genuinely good time. The course correction in 7 months since 1.0 is monumental and should be praised and praised loudly. And I can't help but say that I feel that if you're not into gacha games, which I doubt you're watching this video, or have been on the fence on trying Wuthering Waves, now is absolutely the time.
Yep.
This is the kind of turnaround we saw with Final Fantasy: A Realm Reborn, Cyberpunk 2077, or No Man's Sky. It may never land at a true AAA experience, or whatever that means for you, but I think if you go in with a level head with gacha aspects, or don't interact with them...
The fair thing is, I've heard a lot of people say that Wuwa 2.0 actually does feel like a AAA game. In terms of like the graphical fidelity, in terms of like the overall quality of like the story and the pacing, and then like the music, all of those elements, the crispness of the mechanics, how everything actually feels. And that's the thing. 2.0 definitely does, I think in a lot of ways, feel like a AAA, but 1.0 I think doesn't really at all. And this is the thing, right? You have to also factor in what the visual aesthetic of it is. If the visual aesthetic is the only thing keeping it away from AAA, there are AAA like anime style games. So keep that in mind.
At all, you'll come away with a game that respects your time, engages you, and might even move you. It's very good. Wuthering Waves has done the seemingly impossible, and I cannot recommend it enough to you or anyone who might be interested in getting stuck into a beautiful world with delightful characters without being too bright or peppy. If you're looking for a new game, this very well could be the one for you. And while nothing is perfect, I do believe they really knocked it out of the park with this one. And
they
just need to keep that up for the remainder of the time that they make this game.
Like I said before, man, 1.4 and 1.3 might have been not as feature-rich for a reason, and that's because they were allocating so many resources towards 2.0, and I am very glad that this version update is getting all of the recognition that it frankly deserves, because goddamn, it is amazing. It is a wonderful experience. Bro looks like he's about to cry, and there's a reason why so many people are so upset with the products that Hoyoverse has been releasing, because goddamn, Wuthering Waves 2.0 ruined a lot of gacha games. So let me know what you all think. Peace out.